Well, good morning. Today, City Council begins its April meeting, and I look forward to today's discussions, beginning with the two key items I've designated, as the Mayor does in these meetings, the first being the Reconciliation Action Plan and ModernTO, and I wanted to address those items first of all this morning, and then answer any questions that you might have. I fully expect that City Council will support the City's first Reconciliation Action Plan. This plan represents an important step forward for the City, and we're committed to implementing genuine reconciliation measures with the full engagement of Indigenous communities. This is a living document from day one. I have learned in my discussions with the Indigenous communities what they do not want and they should not have from us. It is a document developed inside the City Hall and presented to them. And so it is going to be a living document. It represents an effort that has been undertaken with their engagement, but that we know going forward that this is going to have to be refined and changed as we bring about genuine reconciliation. I want the Indigenous communities to own this action plan as their own. I have committed to them that nothing about us without us, which are words that have found their way into this discussion as it has gone along about reconciliation, that nothing about us without us will be words that we will honor as a city and as a city government, and myself as mayor. As it continues to evolve over time, this plan will guide the Toronto Public Service over the next 10 years, from 2022 to 2032, to advance truth and justice and reconciliation in Toronto as relates to our Indigenous communities. I want Toronto to be in a position of national leadership when it comes to a reconciliation, both because we do have a large Indigenous population and there is a need for us to have our own action plan, but also because it is the right thing to do. On the occasion of her first official visit to Toronto last week, Governor-General Mary Simon stressed to me the important role that Toronto and its mayor can play in achieving national reconciliation. And I intend to take her words to heart, because I believe that leadership opportunity is something that we should take up. It's that same responsibility Toronto has that has caused, under my leadership, to see the creation of Toronto's first ever Indigenous Affairs Office led by Selina Young. That was an important step forward as well, and it was a statement in and of itself that truth and reconciliation were going to be treated as a government-wide priority here at City Hall. And we've made significant progress in recent years, and I should acknowledge the efforts made by Councillor Mike Layton in that regard, but I think we all know that there is much more that we must do and much more that we can do as a city government. We have to protect the progress that we've made and build on that as part of building a stronger, fairer, and more respectful city. I do want to reiterate that the Reconciliation Action Plan is a living document, and while it will be passed, I hope, by the City Council today, it is something that will grow and evolve as needed to make sure that it is, in fact, most important of all, credible and effective through the eyes of the Indigenous communities in the City of Toronto, and is seen as a commitment by and a work plan for the government of the city that came from the Indigenous communities. Today's vote is the continuation of our commitment to reconciliation. It is not the end, and the plan makes it very clear that it cannot be the end. I am committed to being very much a part of continuing to grow confidence in that evolving action plan. We're also committed to maintaining transparency and accountability with Indigenous communities as the actions in this plan are implemented. I look forward to walking this path of reconciliation together with the efforts to make Toronto a city where Indigenous peoples and cultures and expertise and ways of being can be properly and completely respected. City Council will also be voting today on the next steps in the ModernTO initiative. This is a plan to modernize our city office space footprint so that we can use space, the space we have and other space, as efficiently and effectively as possible. ModernTO, one of the great benefits of it, not the only one, is that it can save and will save taxpayers millions of dollars on an ongoing basis. It opens up city properties to various uses, including, in particular, affordable housing, and the modernized spaces will allow for more jobs to be located in city-owned space, which only makes sense, city-owned space as opposed to more expensive leased space that we've been using over time. This is exactly what people expect us to do here at City Hall, to find sensible ways to do things in the most efficient way possible. reducing costs so as to keep our city operations more affordable, and creating more opportunities for top priorities like affordable housing. The ModernTO initiative will see the city's office footprint go from 55 different sites across the city to 15 locations, primarily by ending leases, sometimes very expensive leases, and creating more effective office hubs within city-owned buildings, including City Hall, Metro Hall, and the Civic Centres in North York, Scarborough, and Etobicoke. This will result in more jobs being located in North York and Scarborough and Etobicoke. 8 properties worth at least $450 million are to be opened up for city building, starting this year, including for affordable housing. 500 to 600 affordable rental and ownership homes in prime downtown and midtown locations, as well as infrastructure and service improvements, new institutional and civic spaces. So, for example, an EMS center will be one of the things that will be contemplated for one of those pieces of land at least. ModernTO is something that I've been proud to champion, and I'm looking forward to seeing this plan come to life in the months and years ahead. Finally, this morning, I would like to bring to your attention that we will be bringing to the City Council during this meeting an update on the city's 2022 finances. As you know, the 2022 budget included almost $500 million in city efficiencies, things we found in the budget that we could achieve as savings and efficiencies and things that were offset. And this was in order to help us with our pandemic shortfall, the pandemic shortfall, of course, being brought about because of a drop in transit ridership and increased costs, mainly in the area of shelter and helping people experiencing homelessness. The law specifies that cities like Toronto cannot run a deficit. That is a law I support. I always have. I've been through 8 budgets where the discipline of that law helped us to make decisions more effectively. So the budget ended up including $1.4 billion that we counted on the federal and provincial governments to address using their much greater financial capacity to address some unique shortfalls like that were caused by the pandemic. Both governments have been very good partners through the pandemic and have provided billions in emergency support. And they have publicly committed to helping cities in this later stage of the pandemic and helping us to ensure a strong economic recovery. Since City Council approved the 2022 budget in mid-February, I have worked with our officials to secure more than $478 million in committed COVID-19 pandemic relief from the other governments. I extend my gratitude to the leadership of both governments for helping us with these important first steps. But they're only first steps. This is 1/3 of the city's 2022 COVID-19 funding shortfall, and that shortfall will be reduced by a further $85 million thanks to increasing TTC ridership and committed provincial reimbursement for pandemic public health costs. That's more than $500 million in less than 2 months. This is good progress, and I'm determined for that to continue. It's a high priority of mine, together with economic recovery and continued sound management of the pandemic and vaccination efforts. I don't expect that we will see an immediate additional commitment of the remainder of these funds in tomorrow's federal budget, but I can assure you that my work at securing the additional funding from both of the other governments continues every single day. The City of Toronto still has more than $800 million in unfunded COVID-19 costs and revenue shortfalls mainly from transit in 2022. And so we're continuing to advocate for further emergency support from the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario. I had some encouraging conversations literally in the last couple of days with Ontario Finance Minister Bethan Falvey, and he has been consistently helpful thus far, and those discussions were very positive and very productive. This needed COVID relief funding, which will go towards TTC ridership shortfalls and our increased COVID-19 shelter costs, along with the ongoing vaccination campaign. This funding is much needed to keep the city on the right path for a strong recovery going forward. And it will avoid the situation that we have worked throughout the pandemic to prevent, namely that we do not want to be in a situation where we cover COVID-19 funding shortfalls by reducing our capital budget. I've indicated before, I will not take the path of having a massive tax increase imposed on people who are struggling at this point in time at the end of the pandemic and with the advent of an inflationary period, and I will not cut services that are vital to people in their day-to-day lives. And so the alternative becomes for us to cut capital. The hundreds of millions of dollars we are spending on capital infrastructure every year have been helping us to catch up on years of underspending and decisions that weren't made to replace and repair and keep up things that needed to be kept up in order to build a great city. And that investment, by the way, in capital also generates thousands of jobs, thousands of good jobs across the city. As we have detailed in the past, any reduction to the capital budget will mean that much-needed infrastructure projects will not get underway this year, and that will mean fewer construction jobs at a time when we want to be building as much as we can and employing as many people as we can as part of our recovery and getting back on our feet in the aftermath of the pandemic. We need those jobs now, and we need those projects now. And they are very much a part of building Toronto and Canada back strongly. Many of these projects that would be cut are needed infrastructure upgrades for the good of transit, for the good of our environment. We should be making these investments so that we can continue to address climate change and protect our infrastructure, and so that we can keep those people working on those projects. So while we have some distance to go, we have made considerable progress. More than $500 million in less than 2 months secured to protect Toronto and protect the progress that we have made as a city, and we are thankful for that support. But we are just as determined to keep those discussions going, to protect our infrastructure, to protect jobs, to protect our economy, Canada's economic engine, and to protect all the progress that we had achieved both before and during the pandemic. This is good work done since the city budget was approved, and we will be working nonstop to bring the federal and provincial governments together to provide further funding in order to make sure Toronto is as strong as ever, and that can in turn help the country and the province to be as strong as ever, economically and in other respects. So those are my comments for today in advance of the council meeting, and I'm now happy to turn it over to Don to take your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. We'll have one question, one follow-up. First up is David Ryder from the Toronto Star.
Hi, Mayor. I saw you on television this morning when asked about the rising COVID-19 case counts and the rising concern that you haven't heard from Dr. Davila, and you said you presume from Dr. Moore any talk about bringing back mandatory restrictions like masks. I'm just wondering, given that it seems like there's a real disconnect between a lot of experts looking at wastewater and hospitalizations and saying the sixth wave could be real trouble, and then the message we seem to be getting from you and other government leaders, at least in Toronto, saying, you know, stay the course, just we'll get vaccinated and we'll be fine. Can you sort of square that circle?
Well, first of all, I don't want my comment as saying that I haven't heard from Dr. Davila to imply that I don't speak with her. I speak with her every day, and we discuss these questions every single day. But I think Toronto has managed through this pandemic quite well. It's been a team effort, but I've been the leader of the team and I'm accountable for it by listening to the professional advice that we receive. And Dr. Davila did maybe communicate a slightly different message that was a heightened concern about what we're seeing in terms of cases of COVID-19 by suggesting that people should perhaps focus a bit more on wearing a mask in more different kinds of settings. And I wholly endorse that advice, and I've been trying to follow it myself, and I hope other people do as well. But by saying I haven't heard from her, when I inquire about this, when we talk each day about the developments, the hospitalizations, the different things that are going on, I haven't yet heard her say to me we should be advocating for a mask mandate. But that doesn't mean that she hasn't offered advice, which I support, and I commend to people to wear a mask as often as they can, which will help to offset what we're seeing right now. This was, and I don't rest on this, but this was something that was predicted to me and to all the other people who are involved in all of the decisions that would happen in the wake of reducing some of the restrictions, that there would be a spike. And that's why we're watching it every single day, because you have to make sure that this kind of a spike doesn't turn into something that is going to be more threatening to us. I should add one more thing. I have been entirely consistent, and I saw some of the same experts talking last night about how they hoped that none of those voices who were out there consistently talking about the importance of vaccination were reducing, the volume of their commentary in that regard. And I don't think it would be fair to suggest I have reduced the repetitiveness of my advice and the actions I've tried to undertake to make sure we had clinics and that I have attended them to show that they're there, to talk to people about the importance of vaccination and our three priorities, which I always say are vaccination, vaccination, and vaccination in that order. So I really do hope, especially now in the wake of the fourth doses that will be made available to people 60 plus, that people will take advantage of that, and that others who've not had 3 doses will get themselves up to date on having 3 doses, because it is the single best thing, even beyond masks, that will help people to avoid being hospitalized and suffer from the effects of COVID-19.
Follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering what it is that you think Dr. Davila and you would need to signal that we need to do something more than vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. Has she given you any indication? Because, as I said, there are lots of people, and not just sort of one or two isolated experts, but there's a lot of people really raising the alarm.
I have, throughout this pandemic, listened carefully to all of the professionals who talk on television and elsewhere about the different things they think should be done. But I have turned in the end to our own medical officer of health as the principal source of advice to me. And I, as a participant in those decisions, and I can only say that, she has not set a threshold with me at the moment and said if this happens or that happens, but we are looking at it every single day. And I think people respect the fact that as Mayor of Toronto, I have abided by professional advice. I do not want these things to turn into political matters. I do not want them to turn into matters of ideology or division. I want them to be based on the best professional advice we can get. And the fact that I'm talking to Dr. Davila about these things every single day indicates my keen interest in doing the right thing. And if the right thing, she says, tomorrow afternoon or 2 days from now is to have some kind of measure to do with masking, then I can tell you I will ask her a bunch of questions about that, but I will follow that advice. But she is the one that has the expertise and the access to all the other scientists, including the ones you see on television, to give me that advice when the time comes. And I'm certainly asking every day to make sure that I'm staying up to date with her thinking and that of the other experts, and we will do the right thing for the people of the City of Toronto, whatever that might be that's called for.
Next up, we have Momin from City News.
Good morning. Thanks so much for taking my question. So my question is about the report on the FIFA World Cup that's coming to council today. It comes with a fairly hefty price tag for the city itself, with concerns about the fact that some of the revenue that we generated, sales tax, et cetera, doesn't actually come back to the city. So I just wanted to get from you, is this cost, if you could explain why spending this kind of money for just 5 games is worth it for the taxpayer of Toronto versus putting that money, say, into certain things, other things that the city needs?
I will start with the fact that much of this investment will be made considerably down the road, because the games in question are not coming until 2026. Secondly, I will indicate that every penny of that money, based on the numbers that are contained in the report, will be returned. And the return beneficiaries will be more the federal and provincial governments, quite frankly, through sales taxes and other kinds of things. People will be at work doing some of the preparation for the World Cup. And thirdly, it will put Toronto on the map. This is the biggest sporting event in the world. And I think for us to be part of it, I think the vast majority of the people of the City of Toronto would be excited by that. They will see the business sense in it for the reputation and the kind of putting the city on the map as a place to invest and to live and to create jobs. And I believe it will get a solid return. So it is something that is, you have to plan these things quite far out. And I can't imagine the biggest city in our country, the most diverse city in the world, not participating in the global sporting event that is going to come to Canada regardless. It has been awarded to Canada, Mexico, and the United States together, and I think it is something that will be exciting. It'll be positive, and it will get all the money back that we invest will come back to the other governments and more. So it is something that I commend to the council for their approval, and I think it will be positively received in that respect.
Follow-up?
Yeah, there's also a report about bike lanes and extending a bike lane pilot on Yonge Street. We know at the committee there were some people that voted against it, including your deputy mayor and councillor Pasternak. So I just wanted to know where you stand on the Yonge Street portion specifically. Would you like to see it get the green light for another year or not?
I've been criticized in the past for using pilot projects because people say this somehow is some kind of a timid way to make decisions. I think it's the right way to make decisions because when you do these projects, and we've done as much bike lane infrastructure expansion on my watch as any other time in the history of the city, to take account of changing times and environmental considerations and other things. But I believe in doing it properly, and I believe in doing it based on data and not politicizing it, which others choose to do, and not basing on ideology either. I'm very consistent on all these things, I think. So in this case, I think that there's every reason to continue with the pilot and to insist that there be some modifications made in order to take account of concerns of local residents and of TTC vehicles and other people. I think those changes can and will be made. I would think that it might be sensible for us to have a look at that pilot extending through this season, but trying to move up the time for the consideration of all the evidence a bit sooner. But I think we should make those changes, see how it does, every one of these bike lane projects over time, because I've been here long enough for enough of them now to see that in the second year things get better because everybody adjusts themselves and we do make some changes to the project itself. And so I think that I've been listening very carefully to what the ratepayers have said. I've met with them. I've talked to the business community. I've listened to the TTC, and I've listened to the cycling community. And as usual, I will be taking all of that into account in terms of my own posture on these things, which I've just mentioned to you, and I will be participating in the ultimate decision-making some months down the road after we've had a chance to make improvements and to collect some further evidence.
And that's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you all.